We may be seeing the end of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone experiment. This morning, 2 people were shot. One person has died. The other person has life-threatening injuries and is in critical condition. According to one witness, one of these shootings, one of these attacks may have been premeditated. They said a person pulled up in an SUV with a rifle and shot one of the individuals. It may have been the person who actually died. Now, this seems kind of obvious. If you don't have police, there's no deterrent. It's almost like the purge. There's nothing stopping someone from knowing they can just show up and kill a person if they want to. This is their opportunity to do so. When we look back at historical riots, when police have called in sick, called the blue flu, there have been historical instances where individuals took the opportunity to take out rivals. Now, we don't know exactly what's going on. A lot of this information is preliminary, but according to the Seattle police, when the officers arrived to try and treat the victims, they were blocked by what they say is a violent crowd, preventing them from reaching those who had been shot. Some have argued that the only reason this man died was because the protesters refused to work with the police. According to various reports, the individuals within the autonomous zone or organized protest, whatever you want to call it, have a strict non-cooperation pact that they will not talk with the police or work with them in any way. And now we can see how this little experiment is playing out. Across the country, in various areas where police have either been disbanded, certain divisions of the police department have been shuttered, crime is on the rise. Shootings in Minneapolis. We've got in New York, shootings skyrocketing. Police across the country are resigning en masse, calling in sick, or completely demoralized. We can see what the result is when the police are just basically abolished, disbanded, or booted from certain areas. It's unsurprising then that people lose their lives. Listen, cops obviously can't stop every single crime. And one of the points they like to make at the Chaz and other activists involved is that the police don't stop crimes in progress, but they are a deterrent effect. Police do stop some crimes while they're happening. They investigate the crimes and try and stop the people from doing it again, but they do act as a deterrent. You know that the police may be patrolling. They may be a few minutes away if you're in a big city, and thus they're there to prevent things like this from happening. And they can safely get these victims to the hospital. This is why we need emergency services. So with all of the complaints about police, we can now see what's happening. Now, in the Chaz, in the Seattle area, local residents are starting to get fed up with this. And I think, considering what we just saw, this could be the end of Chaz. I don't know how many people who are the hippy-dippy peaceful protesters who are chilling there are going to want to hang out when targeted hits are occurring in this zone and the police can't do anything about it. But it's also happening across the country. So let's take a look at what's going on with these police. We've got massive demoralization in Atlanta, in Washington, D.C., in New York. But let's get started with exactly what the police have said and the preliminary reports coming out of the Chaz as to what's going on with these shootings. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are many ways you can give. There is a P.O. box where you can send things. But the best thing you can do is just share this video. I'm competing with a lot of mainstream media organizations that have institutional power, massive marketing budgets, and YouTube props them up in the algorithm. If you think I do a good job, then sharing this video helps me compete with them. If you just want to watch, then click the subscribe button, the like button, the notification bell. And let's get started with reading the statement from Seattle.gov. They say, homicide investigation inside protest area. Homicide detectives are investigating following a fatal shooting that occurred early Saturday morning at 10th Avenue and East Pine Street. One man was declared deceased at the hospital, and another male is being treated for life-threatening injuries. On June 20th at approximately 2:30 a.m., East Precinct officers responded to a report of shots fired in Cal Anderson Park. This is inside the area referred to as the Capitol Hill organized protest. Officers attempted to locate a shooting victim, but were met by a violent crowd that prevented officers safe access to the victims. Officers were later informed that the victims, both males, had been transported to Harborview Medical Center by CHOP medics. Officers responded to Harborview and were informed that one of the victims, a 19-year-old male, had died from injuries. The other victim, also a male, unknown age, remains in the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The suspect or suspects fled and are still at large. There is no description at this time. Homicide detectives responded and are conducting a thorough investigation despite the challenges presented by the circumstances. They then go on to say that you can contact them if you have any information. But we also have some more information coming from the New York Post. They say one person was killed and another injured when a shooting erupted in Seattle's autonomous zone early Saturday, and police are now inside the no-cop zone investigating, according to reports. Seattle police remained Saturday afternoon in the so-called Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, gathering spent shell casings and assembled in riot gear at the border. There were conflicting reports on whether police and fire department were allowed into the zone, with some reports saying that police encountered hostile crowds after a large group assembled on the edge of the protest zone to secure the victim. But both victims had been driven by private vehicles to a local hospital, according to a blog post. Videos recorded inside Chaz showed volunteers scrambling to help victims. Police confirmed the shooting in a Twitter post Saturday, but offered no additional details. 2 gunshot victims were treated at Harborview Medical Center, spokeswoman Susan Gregg told the Seattle Times. 1 died, she said, and the other was in critical condition in the intensive care unit. A security employee working in the area reported seeing the shooter arrive in a black SUV with a 911 caller, and a 911 caller told police a man left the vehicle toting a rifle in the early morning hours at the end of Juneteenth celebrations, according to a local blog post. Seattle police had abandoned the 6-block area following threats to torch the East Precinct on June 8th, following the death of George Floyd in the custody of Minneapolis police. So I'll stress the point again. If witnesses are saying somebody exited a vehicle with a rifle targeting one of these individuals, it sounds like it was premeditated. It was planned. Dare I say, it was an opportunistic hit. That's what it sounds like. Now listen, the information may change. This is all very preliminary information. This will probably change in the next few days once we figure out what happened. But it sounds like someone knew that a person they didn't like was in the zone and there were no police. The activists here, they call it the no cop co-op. Well, now police are inside because they need to investigate this murder. And you see how quickly this fake LARPing ideology dissolves. They say, don't cooperate with the police. This is a no cop co-op, an autonomous zone, or an organized protest. But once someone gets shot, they let the police walk right in. Why? Because the game is over. These people are playing. They don't understand how serious what they're doing is, but they're playing for keeps. And now someone lost their life, and maybe they'll now realize the importance of police. For all of the faults of the police department, and there are many, you need them. Because while they can't necessarily stop every crime in progress, there was a police precinct right there. There could have been police inside. When this person got shot, they could have been there in seconds, perhaps saved this person's life. Now, if you believe the police, that a violent crowd blocked them, it's very likely these people, this individual may have survived if the police were allowed to get to them in time. It may have been that by the time the police arrived, they'd already been transported. But either way, let emergency services save lives. It's what they do. Now we're hearing a response from the Seattle Police Union calling for leadership after the fatal shooting. Fox News reports the head of Seattle's police union lamented the lack of leadership in the city Saturday after reports emerged that an early morning shooting in the so-called CHOP left 1 person dead. According to the Seattle Times, police homicide and assault detectives are investigating the shooting. Quote, on June 20th at approximately 2:30 a.m., East Precinct officers responded to a report of shots fired in Cal Anderson Park. This is inside the area referred to as the CHOP. So we know all this. I read this. They say, in an interview on Fox and Friends Weekend with hosts Pete Hegseth Saturday, Seattle Police Officers Guild President Michael Solon remarked that it is no longer the summer of love, like Democratic Mayor Jenny Durkin claimed, but the summer of chaos. Early this morning, that violence was raw and real, where one of our community members lost their life and police are still not allowed into that area and were prevented to providing that police service to the area to locate victims and or render aid. It's very troubling what's going on, Solon said. Yes, the mayor called it a summer of love, called it a block party, told Trump to mind his own business. And here we are. It's not the first time I'm going to say something like this, but of course I have to. Donald Trump told them to get a handle on things, and they told him basically to shove off. They said, mind your own business. Go hide in your bunker. The mayor said it was more like a festival and a block party, not realizing whether it's a block party or not, what this really means. So let me just say it one more time. The people here, as I've mentioned, for the most part, hippy dippy love fest, dancing around with their silly fake farms, and yes, their weird ideologies. There have been far leftists who are armed. What did that do? Did any of these John Brown Gun Club members stop this shooting? see the man come out? No, they did nothing. Nothing. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe they should not have returned fire, but what good are they? You created a zone where you informed everyone in the world, that there were no police here. Guaranteed. So what happened? So far, it sounds like someone took the opportunity to end the life of someone they didn't like because they knew no one would stop them. And that's exactly what's happened. According to the police, the shooter or shooters are at large. Congratulations, Chaz. Now, local residents have been expressing their frustration for quite some time. This story from King 5. Frustrated residents near Seattle's CHOP want their neighborhood back. Some residents near the Capitol Hill organized protest want their lives back amid ongoing occupation in the neighborhood. I think you get the gist of this story. It's about time. We know. They're complaining. Some of these people have already expressed their frustration, saying, we didn't choose to live here. One woman said that that the noise is unbearable. She posted on the local forum saying, please let us sleep. We live here. We didn't choose to live here. You surrounded us and we've been respectful, but you bang drums and make noise all through the night. And yes, that's exactly what it was like during Occupy Wall Street. When I was down there, people would bang on buckets 24/7. And then eventually, local residents complained, saying we can't sleep with all the banging, and asked them to stop. There was eventually like a local pact between organizers, but some people said, F you. There's no law here. There's no leaders here. We can do what we want. So the troublemakers remained. Now you've got locals who are just asking for it to stop. I can't imagine these people are feeling comfortable right now knowing that they live in a place where they're surrounded by activists. There are no police. There's noise. It's endless. And someone just died. Congratulations. Your hipster, high-end, foofy, hippie zone has become a crime-infested, lawless area of the city. This is Capitol Hill, for those that aren't familiar. This is like central Seattle, hipster, fine dining, cheese and wine. And now it's crime-infested and lawless, to say the least. We're seeing crime spike amid these calls to get rid of the police. Now, perhaps the best example of what happens when you get rid of police is the Chaz. Somebody's dead. But it's not just the Chaz. We're seeing it in Minneapolis. We're seeing it in New York. Let me show you what's going on in New York City. Shootings surge in NYC amid disbanding of NYPD's plainclothes anti-crime unit. Shocking, huh? Not really. Shootings are surging this week in New York City with 28 incidents and 38 victims reported since Monday. By comparison, the same week last year, there were only 12 shootings for the entire week. So that discounts the idea that the increase is relative to the lockdown. Some people have tried to say when the lockdown happened, crime decreased rapidly. And that's true. And then as soon as they reopened, crime spiked. Trying to make it seem like the spike is actually just relative to the decrease in crime's actually normal. No, I'm sorry. From the same time last year. In the most recent reported shooting at 4 p.m. Friday in East New York, Brooklyn, a 27-year-old man died of multiple gunshot wounds to his torso, face, and leg in front of 640 Stanley Avenue. A 17-year-old boy who was also shot there was in stable condition. This is what the politicians wanted. No bail. Nobody in Rikers. Cops not arresting anyone. One angry law enforcement source said Friday. All those things equal people walking around on the street with guns, shooting each other. That's right. It was the leadership in New York City who released the prisoners and the inmates from jails over COVID fears. They then started rearresting people who actually were just released. It's the people who called for bail reform. Now, to be fair, I still think there's something important in the bail reform idea, but we can see it certainly isn't working. And so you got to accept that. Criminals are being released and they're reoffending. And now they got rid of a 600 person NYPD plainclothes unit that I believe the New York Post has said was responsible for stop and frisk. Now, I'm very critical of stop and frisk, but the police claim that it works. There are a lot of problems with stop and frisk, but now we're seeing shootings on the rise. So you know what? You're going to have to work it out, New York. You want to get rid of these police? You're more than welcome to do so. But don't be surprised then when crime is on the rise and people end up losing their lives. It's not just New York City, though. It's obvious, right? Come on. Multiple shootings reported across Minneapolis overnight. At least 8 people shot June 17th. This is just after they voted to disband their police. Now, the police force isn't gone. But criminals are becoming more and more brazen. You know why? They know that the cops can't do anything anymore. It's not just about getting rid of the police. It's about muzzling the police. Look what happened in Atlanta. You had the shootings of Rayshard Brooks, a tragedy. And the cop who shot him, clearly in self-defense, in the line of duty, was just charged with felony murder. Now cops are calling in sick for the third day in a row. From 11 alive. Atlanta police sick out continues for third day. The alleged blue flu began after the announcement by DA Paul Howard that he would file charges against the two officers in the Rayshard Brooks shooting. A lot of people who follow this on the left, well, I should say a lot of people who are promoting the indictment don't actually know the story. They don't know that this man, Rayshard Brooks, stole the taser and fired it at one of the officers, and they fired in self-defense. Certainly a tragedy, but they don't know. They think it's just an evil cop who kicked him when he was down. That's what the DA said. Well, these cops keep calling in sick. The demoralization is spreading across the country. And whether or not cops don't show up for work, I'm sure many aren't going to respond to calls. Why? They'll get in trouble. So now I think we're going to see brazen criminals taking the opportunity, knowing that police are scared to actually enforce the law. That's what's happening. Nearly 75% of disgruntled DC cops want to quit amid national protests, while NYCD murders have increased by 70% since unrest began, and shootings in the Big Apple have more than doubled. Murders in New York City are up 70%. Look, I understand the complaints people have with police in big cities. And you got to understand that the police in big cities are very different from police in small towns. Small town cops, they're fine. And I think it's 81% in a recent poll said they were happy with their police departments. Now, I understand when it comes to New York City, it's different. You have a very large department. It's almost it's massive, almost an entirely corporate type structure of how big the NYPD really is. And people have complaints. But with the 300 plus million interactions, according to the NYPD union, and almost all of them positive, you have to wonder what the real goal of disbanding, abolishing, or targeting the police really is. Maybe they want the chaos. While all of this has been going down, the insane far left has been going around destroying statues of our founding fathers and erasing history. Toppling Francis Scott Key, Ulysses S. Grant, and the cops won't do anything. They stand back and watch as it happens because they're demoralized. So who's guarding our infrastructure? Who's guarding our public structures? Probably no one. And that's why we're seeing them all come down with relative ease. Now in D.C., they say most of these cops are demoralized. A new survey reveals almost 3/4 of Washington, D.C. cops are ready to quit the force, while violent crime is surging in New York City. Protesters across the country are calling for departments to be abolished or defunded following the death of George Floyd. They say Washington, D.C. Council passed an emergency police reform bill last week, which expands the training requirements for officers and orders the public naming of cops involved in shootings. The bill also adds legal protections for people who are searched by police, among a whole host of other changes. Many D.C. police officers have been left disillusioned by the bill's passing and feel as if they've been thrown under the bus by lawmakers. A D.C. police union survey of 600 cops shows that a staggering 71% of them are now considering leaving the force. Wow. I mean, that is massive. 39% of those surveyed say they are considering leaving law enforcement altogether. The poll also reveals widespread anger at lawmakers, with 98.7% of those polled saying they feel completely abandoned by the D.C. Council. Similarly, 96% of the surveyed officers, believe crime rates will rise in D.C. due to the reforms. They will. We've seen it. I'm sorry. They will. Okay. They will rise. It's already rising in New York. You just saw what happened in Chaz. If these occupiers took their little Occupy protest, but let the police do their job, somebody would probably not have died. And this other person is in the hospital right now, and they may die as well. So I have to wonder what the true goal is. These people have spent so much of their time being addicted to social media, watching stupid rage bait police brutality videos. They forget that these are fringe moments. They are few and far between. And yes, they're tragedies. Yes, it is horrifying when someone loses their life at the hands of an officer who made serious mistakes or intentionally killed somebody. And that's why they must be held to account. And sometimes they aren't. And that calls for reform. They don't show you If they showed you every single video of every single police interaction, you'd probably roll your eyes at half of them. A cop pulling you over, saying your headlights out, that's an infraction. Okay, fine, I get it. Most of them are probably warnings. Hey, buddy, I pulled you over because your light's out. Do me a favor, just get it fixed. Sound good? All right, here's your warning. It's logged. If you get pulled over again, you'll get a ticket, but, stay safe. How many times have people had interactions with police that were fine? I've had several interactions in the past several years that were fine. I'm not going to pretend like I'm happy getting pulled over, okay? And then sometimes you get a warning. But what happens on social media is you get inundated with videos of cops being awful. And you know what, man? Some of them are okay. I'll say it. There are some instances where activists have highlighted police brutality. But listen, you've got to make sure you are not just being radicalized by the endless stream of rage bait content meant to generate traffic, okay? The same is true for the content I produce. That's why I always say watch other creators. Don't just come to one person for the news. I understand there's a challenge in this because I know other people don't say the same thing. Like CNN will tell you, just watch us, just watch us. And they won't tell you everything that's really going on. Listen, in the Chaz, okay? The chop, they call it. It's mostly a farmer's market. They're giving out ice cream. They're doing their hippie dances and they're spinning around and they're smiling and dancing because that's how life is for the most part. There are bad interactions with police, but they aren't the majority. They are a small fraction. And when you tell people it's just the bad apples and they try and claim something like, oh, just the bad apples, but all of these cops are, demoralized or whatever. Yes, it is the bad apples. It is. Okay. We want to get rid of those bad apples. You know what I was told by a cop recently? Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop because it makes their job more dangerous. They're right. These activists like to highlight, when you point this out, that there are moments where police get the backs of cops who have done things wrong. Yeah, they're bad cops, dude. I have seen bad cops. I have seen a lot of them. But listen, when you encounter a bad cop and their buddies who help lie and help them get away with bad things, it's because you've encountered a bad cop. I'll tell you what. I've been pulled over many, many times in my life. And some of them I think are BS. And you want to argue with a cop who thinks he's right, you think you're right. I get it, man. It's a system we have. It's not perfect. But I'll tell you what. You know what we don't want? A police state. We don't want jackboot cops patrolling our neighborhoods 24/7. It's bad enough they come out for the riots and the protests. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. We don't want it. You know what else we don't want? A lawless state. What we do want are police officers who can respond and do their job to the best of their abilities, as much as sometimes we get tickets and we don't like it. Sometimes you get arrested and it's wrong. It happens and you fight it. But where we are at in terms of our law enforcement, at least we used to be, was actually kind of okay. Do we need reform? In my opinion, yes, we do. But we have a good balance. I think we want to see a demilitarization of the police. We want to reserve the high-powered weaponry, the armored personnel carriers and stuff for extreme moments. Probably not even protests, to be honest. And we want cops to be able to safely do their job. Right now, there are people calling for social workers to go out and handle some of these, mental illness cases or homelessness and stuff. And it's like, I hear you. And I like the idea of some kind of civil guard. They have more powers and more protection. But I don't think it's going to change all that much. These people don't realize that a lot of these calls are handled properly. Listen, for every story you've heard about a call gone wrong, there's probably 10,000 that were fine. You know what the issue is? On social media, when the cop shows up, shakes your hand and says, is everything okay? Just let me know if you need anything. I'm here for you. They're not going to put that on Facebook. No, they're going to put the video on Facebook where the bad cop does the bad thing or where the scared cop does the stupid thing. But these, when you look at the stats, are just incredibly rare. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of defending the police. They say ACAB. All cops are bad. I'll use the family-friendly version. It's just not true. In the least. Not true. Cops got a tough job. Most interactions are fine. The overwhelming majority. I think we need to, as a society, figure out how to make sure that people have confidence in their police. Legit police reform. Something that can help cops have the trust of their communities. It's mostly in the big cities, to be honest. But that's why I think some kind of civil guard really does make sense. And what the civil guard really refers to is specifically the South American countries where the first responders have batons. They don't come with guns or tasers. And if they can't handle a situation, they immediately call for the legit police to come in who are more armed. But this means you have a lower chance of outright conflict. And if a civil guard arrives for a call and they realize they're ill-equipped, then they can escalate things. Maybe it's not even about a separate department. It's just first responders, our community responders, something like that. I think there are things we can do. But I also think you need to realize how exaggerated a lot of these problems are. They really, really are. You are seeing it more because of social media, and it's driving people insane. And they're going to create one of two things: a lawless state where people are killed, or a police state when the violence and vandalism, the riots get so extreme, then Trump calls in the army, invoking the Insurrection Act. We don't want any of these things. People need to calm down. You need to get off the internet and go out and just talk to your neighbors for once. Otherwise, the police are being demoralized. They're going to quit. And here's the last little note here. Cities call on cops to work overtime to quell unrest, despite defund rallying cry. It's not just about cops being demonized, demoralized. They're being forced to work overtime like crazy. It's just going to make everything worse. Everybody needs to chill. I hope the person who got shot at the Chaz is okay. I know they're in critical condition. I hope they make it. And I hope the activists realize that, no, I'm sorry, all cops are not bad. There's maybe some cultural issues in local departments, but you're talking about big city cop culture, and you're talking specifically about the cops who do bad. So maybe there's some reform, maybe some new training programs, but we're in seriously we're in a tight spot right here. I think the activists are taking things too far. Police reform seems like a reasonable approach, and many police officers are demoralized just by the reform. I still think it's important. It is. And I think we want to make sure we let our local officers know we may want reform, but trust us. We want reform because we want you to feel safer. We want people to feel safer around you, and we want this to work out properly. And if we do nothing, we've got negative press going crazy and people are losing their minds. So let's figure out how we solve this problem, fix these perceptions, and bring trust back to our police. Because as much as these people don't realize, the local police departments are civilians. They live in your neighborhoods. They're your neighbors. They go to the same meetings. They vote for the same politicians. I understand big cities may be different, so let's talk about it. But this is not the answer. Things are getting worse. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. And I will see you all then.